can be sure of at this juncture is that I'm a transcendental unity of apperception. That's the I. Now, in a way, that's very much in keeping with the whole tradition from John Locke. You see, that business of personal identity. You see, how do I know that I am? How do I know the I? What is the I that I know? And in the empiricist tradition, it depended on memory, you see, and all of the present awarenesses I have of my past and present, that's the I. At least that's the empirical I, the I that I'm aware of. But Kant has gone further than that, you see, because that's an atomized kind of I. He's got a unified kind of I. It's a big step forward in that sense. And it's because of the a priori that he can call it a unified I. You see, because the I is contributing its unity. Now, when I say the I is contributing its unity, it's not just that the I is unifying its world that it imagines out there, creating our world. The I is creating its own unity. I create myself. Well, Kant doesn't put it that way, but Sartre does. You see. And Sartre is able to put it that way, I create myself, because Kant gave him the tools for doing it. I said that existentialism was a byproduct of what Kant is doing. All right, so the transcendental unity of apperception. Yeah, the question, of course, is still whether nature in itself corresponds to the way we think. And on that, take a look at his conclusion to this section on 396. 396. The bottom of the second column. It sounds, no doubt, very strange and absurd that nature should have to conform to our subjective ground and be dependent on it with respect to her laws. Now remember, the Copernican revolution that Kant was pulling was that it's not the case that our knowledge is dependent on what nature is like, but that nature is dependent upon what we think, at least nature for us is. And it sounds, no doubt, very strange that nature should have to conform to us, rather than us conforming our knowledge to nature. You see. But if we consider that what we call nature is nothing but the whole of phenomena, nothing but appearances, that's what nature is, it's what we experience. Not a thing in itself, but a number of representations in the mind. Then we'll no longer be surprised that we only see her through the fundamental faculty of our knowing, the transcendental perception, and in that unity without which it couldn't be called the object of all possible experience, that is, nature. In other words, once you get the way in which the world of nature is unified for us, then you see that what we call nature is conforming to us, rather than us simply passively conforming to it. So you anticipate there his phenomena-noumena distinction. Okay, any question to that point? I'm ready otherwise for the schematization. Okay, 403 is where the schematization begins. And here, as I said, the question is, how do the forms and the categories get connected? because the one is dealing with particular sense experiences and the other is dealing with abstract concepts. They are heterogeneous. And if they're so heterogeneous, do they have any point of contact? In other words, the question is, do they have anything in common? Any point of contact? That was the trouble with Descartes' pineal gland. A pineal gland is a physical thing. How can it help you make contact with an immaterial thing? You see, that's why the pineal gland was such a goof. I didn't say goof off, I said goof. Descartes' mistake. Obviously Kant does not want to pull another pineal gland on us, or anything analogous to it. So you've got to find some commonality between the sensibility and the understanding, between the forms and the categories. What's that going to be? Well, in a word, time. Time. How come time? Well, you remember his discussions of space and time? Where space is the form of the outer sense and time is the form of the inner sense. In Lockean language, space is the form of sensation and time is the form of all our reflections. Where is your time consciousness? What is it of? The sequence in your consciousness. That's why time drags or races or stands still. Time consciousness. Races, drags, stands still. So time is the form of the reflective consciousness. But of course it's in the inner consciousness, in our reflective awareness, that we're aware of our concepts, abstract ideas. You see? So they have that point of contact. Time is in common to both sense perception and thought, because they both go on in the consciousness. So what he tries to show then is that we can relate the concept of time to all of the categories. We can relate the concept of time to all of the categories. And what we develop then is an abstraction. You see, you can call it a temporalized conception of cause and effect. Isn't that the ordinary way we think about cause and effect? The cause must be the concurrent with or antecedent to the effect. You see, we think it that way. And the idea of substance is of something that is. It has an enduring identity, continuity, time. And so these categories in relationship to time provide us with schema. Now that's his term, schema. I suppose you might call it a conceptual model. A conceptual model. A paradigm. An abstraction. Something of that sort. Schema. Maybe you use the word schema in some other regards. But look on page 404. 404, the top of the page, where he says the fact is that our pure sensuous concepts do not depend on images of objects, but on schemata. That's the plural of schema. No image of a triangle in general is ever adequate to its concept. How do you think the concept of triangle? Little picture of lines in your mind or of things that have breadth as well as length. Lines don't have that. No, what you have is something that exists nowhere but in thought. Not in sense images, but in thought, in abstraction. And it's a rule for the synthesis of imagination with respect to triangular things. So you develop mental abstractions, concepts, you verbalize them. Maybe you provide mathematical formulae for them. But you don't picture them. So the schemata. And you find, therefore, on page 405 that he runs through the various categories. The schema of substance, 405, first complete paragraph. The schema of substance is the permanence of the real in time. The representation of it is a substratum for the empirical determination of time in general, which therefore remains while everything else changes. So we think of substance as a substratum. That's a schema. It's an abstraction. And then the next paragraph, the schema of cause and causality is the real which, when once supposed to exist, is always followed by something else. You think of it as an abstraction. You define a cause. A definition in that sense is like a rule, a model, schema, and so forth all the way through. The schematization of the understanding. So on 405, halfway down the page, he says the schemata are nothing but determinations of time a priori, according to rules. Yes, ways of thinking about time according to rules. And as applied to all possible objects, they refer, in the order of the categories, to series of time, contents of time, the order of time, the comprehension of time. So the schemata, then, of the conditions that are involved in thinking. Okay, schematization of the understanding. Well, with that in hand, the section on the phenomena and the noumena follows very easily, and I'd encourage you to read that, because this is really the conclusion of the whole transcendental analytic. The conclusion of the whole transcendental analytic. The ground of distinction of all subjects into phenomena and noumena. Phenomena, remember, appearances. The thing for me. The